The story of the Maccabees is not merely one of historical warfare or political maneuvering. It is a saga of faith, survival, and identity. The Maccabees, descendants of the priestly family of Mattathias, have been immortalized not only in the Jewish tradition, but also in the annals of history as the champions of Jewish autonomy during a tumultuous time. The period of their revolt against the Seleucid Empire is one marked by bravery, the clash of cultures, and above all, an unwavering commitment to the observance of their faith. At the heart of the Maccabean Revolt and the eventual establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty lies a powerful story of defiance, divine intervention, and the preservation of Jewish identity against overwhelming odds. The narrative begins in a world where Greek influence was at its zenith under the rule of Alexander the Great. Following Alexander's death, his empire was divided, and the Seleucid Empire, led by Antiochus IV Epiphanes, sought to impose Hellenistic culture upon the territories it controlled, including Judea. In the face of this, many Jews struggled to maintain their religious practices and traditions, while others, seeking to align with the powerful Greeks, adopted their ways. This cultural clash created a volatile situation, especially when Antiochus sought to forcibly convert the Jews to Hellenism, outlawing circumcision, the Sabbath, and the observance of the Torah. It is within this deeply challenging context that Mattathias, a priest from the town of Modin, and his 5 sons are thrust into the story. Mattathias's initial refusal to comply with the king's decree marks the spark that would ignite a rebellion. His defiance, which began with the refusal to offer a pagan sacrifice, was soon followed by the murder of a Hellenized Jew who was about to perform the sacrificial act and the subsequent killing of a Seleucid officer who tried to enforce the law. These acts of resistance did not go unnoticed, and Mattathias fled with his family into the wilderness, where he began to gather followers. His rallying cry was simple, yet powerful. "Whosoever is zealous for the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me." 1 Maccabees 2, verse 27. In the years that followed, the Maccabean Revolt would go on to challenge not only the political might of the Seleucid Empire, but the very cultural and religious foundations of Jewish life in the ancient world. The fight for religious freedom became a central theme of the Maccabean struggle. As the conflict grew, it was no longer just about armed resistance to an occupying force. It became a battle for the soul of Judaism. The Maccabees fought not only for territorial control, but also for the right to practice their faith without interference. The significance of the revolt can be seen not just in the military victories, but in the reclaiming of Jewish worship. The rededication of the temple in Jerusalem, which had been desecrated by Antiochus, became a symbol of the Maccabean success. This event, commemorated by the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, marks the triumph of light over darkness, of Jewish faith over oppressive foreign rule. However, the story of the Maccabees is far more complex than just a tale of religious freedom. It involves shifts in power, political intrigue, and the eventual establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty, which would rule Judea for more than a century. Over time, the Maccabees, once the heroes of their people, began to embrace some of the very Hellenistic practices they had initially opposed, and their reign became fraught with internal conflict, power struggles, and the erosion of their original ideals. Even so, their legacy endured, deeply influencing the course of Jewish history and shaping the identity of the Jewish people for generations to come. The Maccabean Revolt began in earnest after Mattathias's death, with his son Judah taking the lead. Judah, who was later called Maccabee, meaning the hammer, proved to be a capable and fearless leader.
His military strategy was as unconventional as it was effective, utilizing guerrilla tactics to undermine the vastly superior forces of the Seleucids. Under Judah's command, the Maccabees launched a series of successful skirmishes, and they soon began to challenge the Seleucid armies in open battle. One of the most pivotal moments in the early phase of the revolt occurred in 166 BCE, when Judah led a successful attack against a larger Seleucid force. This victory, though it did not completely remove the Seleucids from the region, proved that the Maccabees were not just a ragtag group of rebels. They were a force to be reckoned with. As Judah's forces grew in strength, so too did their resolve to reclaim the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, which had been desecrated by Antiochus IV. This act of defilement was one of the key catalysts for the revolt, as Antiochus had erected an altar to Zeus within the temple and sacrificed pigs on it, a repulsive act to the Jewish people who saw the temple as the holiest of spaces. The retaking of Jerusalem was a monumental task, but Judah and his followers were undeterred. In 164 BCE, after a series of engagements, Judah and his army were able to drive the Seleucids out of Jerusalem and cleanse the temple. The rededication of the temple, known as the Feast of Dedication, was a time of great joy and celebration for the Jewish people, as it marked not only a military victory, but a spiritual one as well. The miracle that is said to have accompanied the rededication of the temple is central to the story of Hanukkah. According to Jewish tradition, when the Maccabees sought to rekindle the menorah, the sacred lamp of the temple, they found only a single cruse of olive oil that had not been defiled. Miraculously, the oil lasted for 8 days, long enough for new oil to be prepared. This event, seen as divine intervention, has been commemorated by Jews ever since during the 8-day festival of Hanukkah, which celebrates not only the military victory, but also the miracle of the oil. Following the rededication of the temple, Judah's role as leader became more complex. He faced new challenges, both from within and outside Judea. The Seleucids, though temporarily weakened, were far from defeated, and their forces regrouped for further attempts to regain control of the region. Additionally, the internal political situation within Judea was becoming increasingly unstable. Judah's growing influence led to resentment among some of the other Jewish factions, who feared that his leadership would lead to the rise of a powerful centralized monarchy, something they did not want. Despite these internal and external pressures, Judah continued to lead his people with courage and determination, never straying from his central goal of preserving the Jewish faith and defending the sovereignty of Judea. However, in 160 BCE, Judah's life came to a tragic end. During a campaign against the Seleucid army, Judah was killed in battle. His death marked an end for an era of the Maccabees, but it did not spell the end of their cause. His brothers, Jonathan and Simon, would continue the struggle, albeit under different circumstances. Jonathan, who succeeded Judah, proved to be an astute diplomat as well as a warrior. He navigated the shifting allegiances between the Seleucid Empire, the Ptolemies, and the Jewish factions in Judea, ultimately securing a measure of independence for the Jewish people. Under his leadership, Judea became a semi-independent entity, and Jonathan himself was appointed as the high priest, further consolidating the Maccabean power in both religious and political spheres.
Jonathan's reign, however, would not be without its challenges. In 142 BCE, he was captured by the Seleucids and executed, leaving his brother Simon to take up the mantle of leadership. Simon, perhaps the most politically astute of the Maccabee brothers, recognized that the time had come to establish a permanent Maccabean dynasty. He skillfully navigated the shifting political landscape and secured Judean independence once and for all. In 141 BCE, Simon was declared both the high priest and the ruler of Judea, establishing the Hasmonean dynasty. This marked the culmination of the Maccabean struggle for independence and the establishment of a Jewish kingdom in the land of Israel that would last for over a century. The Hasmonean dynasty was initially celebrated for its accomplishments. The Maccabees had succeeded in driving out the Seleucids, rededicating the temple, and re-establishing a Jewish kingdom. Under Simon and his successors, Judea enjoyed a period of relative peace and prosperity. The dynasty expanded its borders and consolidated power, and Jewish culture and religion flourished. However, the very successes of the Hasmoneans would also sow the seeds of their eventual downfall. As the Hasmonean kings grew more powerful, they began to embrace many of the same Hellenistic practices that the Maccabees had originally opposed. The high priests, who were meant to serve as spiritual leaders, also assumed political and military power, a development that was controversial among the Jewish people. The internal political situation became increasingly unstable, and the Hasmoneans, once champions of Jewish independence, began to fracture along factional lines. Furthermore, the Hasmoneans' increasing reliance on foreign alliances, particularly with the Romans, led to their eventual downfall. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey intervened in the Hasmonean civil war, and Judea became a client state of Rome. The Hasmonean dynasty, though still in power in name, was effectively under Roman control. In 37 BCE, the Roman-backed Herod the Great took control of Judea, bringing an end to the Hasmonean reign. Despite the eventual decline of the Maccabees and the Hasmonean dynasty, their legacy remained indelible. The Maccabean Revolt proved that the Jewish people could fight for their religious and political independence, and the rededication of the temple became an enduring symbol of the enduring power of faith. Even as the Hasmoneans became more Hellenized and aligned with foreign powers, the initial ideals of the Maccabees, the preservation of Jewish faith, identity, and autonomy, continued to resonate with the Jewish people. Their struggle laid the groundwork for future resistance against foreign domination, and their story would inspire generations of Jews throughout history. The Maccabees' story also serves as a reminder of the complexities of resistance movements. While their revolt began as a struggle for religious freedom, it ultimately led to the establishment of a dynasty that in many ways resembled the very forces they had once opposed. This paradoxical outcome, where the victors became entangled in the very practices they had originally resisted, highlights the inherent challenges of maintaining ideological purity in the face of power and political necessity. Yet, despite these contradictions, the Maccabean legacy remained a source of pride for the Jewish people, symbolizing both the triumph of the spirit and the difficult compromises that often accompany the exercise of power. The Maccabees' story is also significant for its role in shaping Jewish identity and religious observance. The rededication of the temple and the events surrounding the holiday of Hanukkah became an enduring symbol of Jewish resilience and faith. Hanukkah, which celebrates the miracle of the oil and the victory of the Maccabees, remains one of the most beloved and widely celebrated Jewish holidays. In this way, the Maccabees' victory and their story of courage and determination continue to inspire Jews around the world to this day.
The Maccabean Revolt and its aftermath were not just a pivotal chapter in Jewish history. They left an indelible mark on the religious, cultural, and political landscape of the ancient world. Though the Hasmonean dynasty ultimately fell to Roman influence, the ideals championed by the Maccabees, especially the preservation of Jewish religious practices and autonomy, remained central to Jewish identity for centuries to come. While the Maccabees' story is often remembered through the lens of the rededication of the temple and the miracle of Hanukkah,
Their journey through faith, warfare, and governance was far more complex, laden with moments of both triumph and tragedy, of religious zeal and political pragmatism. The immediate aftermath of the Maccabean Revolt marked a period of intense consolidation of power. Under Simon's leadership, Judea gained unprecedented autonomy, and the Maccabees transitioned from freedom fighters to kings. Simon was recognized not only as the high priest, but also as the political leader of the Jewish state. This was a significant shift, as it marked the first time in centuries that the Jewish people had political independence in their homeland. Simon's reign was, in many ways, the zenith of Maccabean achievement. He expanded the territory of Judea and restored stability, all while fostering a sense of national pride and religious devotion among his people. His leadership symbolized the success of the Maccabean rebellion and the triumph of Jewish self-determination. However, this newfound independence was fraught with challenges, both external and internal. Externally, Judea's geographical location made it a prize for neighboring empires. The Seleucids, though weakened, were not yet fully defeated, and the rise of Rome in the Mediterranean world signaled the beginning of a new imperial power that would soon play a decisive role in Judean politics. Internally, the Hasmonean dynasty faced increasing political divisions. The very nature of the Maccabean Revolt had been religious at its core, but as the Maccabees transitioned into political rulers, they began to adopt practices that were less in line with their original ideals. The fusion of religious and political power, while practical for the survival of the nascent kingdom, also sowed the seeds of tension between the Hasmoneans and other Jewish factions. The Hasmonean kings became increasingly entangled in the political intrigue of the Mediterranean world. With their kingdom surrounded by powerful neighbors, the Hasmoneans sought alliances with other political entities, most notably the Romans. Simon's successors were increasingly dependent on Roman favor, and this dependence would eventually lead to the dynasty's downfall. By the end of the 2nd century BCE, the Hasmoneans had entered into a fragile alliance with the Romans, which, while beneficial in the short term, proved to be a double-edged sword. While the Romans provided military support, they also slowly exerted increasing influence over Judean affairs. As the Hasmonean rulers turned to the Romans for protection, they found themselves embroiled in the political machinations of Rome, which led to further destabilization within Judea. This external influence began to undermine the very independence the Maccabees had fought so hard to achieve. By the time of the reign of John Hyrcanus II in the early 1st century BCE, the Hasmoneans were embroiled in internal civil wars. The kingdom had been divided between competing factions, one supporting the traditional priestly line and the other supporting the more Hellenized elements of society. It was during this turbulent period that Rome, under the leadership of General Pompey, took decisive action. In 63 BCE, Pompey intervened in the civil war, capturing Jerusalem and effectively ending the Hasmonean reign. While the Hasmoneans would continue to hold nominal power for a time, Judea was now a client state of Rome, a situation that would eventually lead to the rise of King Herod the Great, a Roman-backed ruler who would preside over Judea during the time of Jesus Christ. The fall of the Hasmonean dynasty marks a significant turning point in the history of Judea and the Jewish people. For the Maccabees, their victory had been achieved through a combination of divine favor and human courage. But as their reign gave way to Roman domination, the Maccabees were left with a legacy of both triumph and compromise. The religious and nationalistic zeal that had fueled the revolt began to fade in the face of external political realities, and the kingdom that had once been a beacon of Jewish independence became in many ways a satellite of Roman power. Despite these political shifts, the legacy of the Maccabees endured in the collective memory of the Jewish people. The holiday of Hanukkah, which commemorates the rededication of the temple and the victory of the Maccabees, remains one of the most significant and widely celebrated Jewish holidays. The story of the Maccabees has become synonymous with the fight for religious freedom, the triumph of light over darkness, and the enduring power of faith. It is a story that speaks to the resilience of the Jewish people, their ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, and their unwavering commitment to preserving their religious and cultural heritage. It has replaced Purim in some ways, when political freedom is the goal over religious freedom, and inspired new resistances, such as those towards the Romans. The Maccabean Revolt also had profound implications for Jewish religious life. The rededication of the temple, which was the focal point of the revolt, symbolized not only the physical reclamation of a sacred space, but also the spiritual renewal of the Jewish people. The miracle of the oil, in which a small amount of oil burned for 8 days, is a central aspect of the Hanukkah story, and it underscores the theme of divine intervention. This miracle, coupled with the Maccabees' military victory, became a symbol of Jewish endurance and faith. The celebration of Hanukkah, which involves lighting the menorah, eating foods fried in oil, and reciting prayers, continues to remind Jews of their history and their perseverance in the face of oppression. In addition to its religious significance, the Maccabean Revolt also played a role in shaping the political and cultural identity of the Jewish people. The Hasmonean dynasty, despite its eventual decline, demonstrated that it was possible for the Jewish people to reclaim their land and their religious practices after centuries of foreign domination. The Maccabee struggle set a precedent for future generations of Jews who would throughout history strive for self-determination and religious autonomy. While the Hasmonean dynasty would fall under Roman control, the story of the Maccabees remained a source of inspiration for later Jewish resistance movements, including those during the Roman and Byzantine periods, as well as during the medieval and modern eras. The Maccabees' fight for religious freedom resonates not only with Jewish communities, but with all those who seek to preserve their identity and faith in the face of external pressure. It serves as a timeless reminder of the power of faith, the importance of cultural preservation, and the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to be assimilated or oppressed. It is a narrative that transcends time and continues to inspire individuals and communities around the world, as it highlights the enduring human struggle for autonomy and religious expression. The lessons of the Maccabees, therefore, are not just confined to the ancient world. They continue to speak to the struggles of marginalized communities, oppressed peoples, and individuals who fight to preserve their beliefs and cultural traditions in the face of external forces. In this sense, the Maccabees' legacy remains not just a historical tale, but a living and breathing testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of faith.
As the Maccabean Revolt and the subsequent establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty played out, the Jewish people found themselves navigating a complex world of shifting allegiances and changing political landscapes. The military victories and territorial expansions led by the Maccabees were initially seen as a triumph for Jewish independence, but over time, the challenges of governance and foreign influence began to erode the foundations of their once pristine ideals. One of the most significant aspects of the Maccabean struggle was its transformation from a religious revolt into a political and military campaign for power. While the revolt was ignited by the religious persecution of the Jewish people under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the longer the Maccabees fought, the more their efforts took on a political dimension. Initially, the Maccabees had fought to preserve Jewish religious practices, including the observance of the Sabbath, circumcision, and the study of the Torah. However, as their military successes mounted,
Their role in Judean politics became more pronounced, and they eventually found themselves in a position of ruling a state. The religious fervor that had once been the cornerstone of their struggle began to intertwine with the realities of ruling a kingdom, leading to internal divisions and corruption. The Hasmonean dynasty, founded by Simon in 141 BCE, was, in essence, the fulfillment of the Maccabees' dream of an independent Jewish state. However, the years that followed would show that ruling a kingdom was no easy task, especially when faced with competing factions, internal strife, and the pressure to maintain religious purity. The Hasmonean kings, who were also high priests, began to embrace certain elements of Hellenistic culture they had once opposed. This shift was deeply troubling to some factions within the Jewish community, especially the Pharisees, who advocated for strict adherence to Jewish law and tradition. The division between these groups led to a fragmented society, and as the Hasmoneans attempted to navigate the competing interests, they found themselves increasingly caught in a web of political intrigue and conflict. As the Hasmonean dynasty's grip on power weakened, the external threat of Rome loomed ever larger. The Romans, who had already established themselves as the dominant power in the Mediterranean world, were eager to expand their influence over Judea. The Hasmoneans, who had once resisted outside interference, now found themselves relying on Roman support to maintain their power. This dependence on Rome would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Hasmonean dynasty. The end of the Hasmonean era began with the rise of the Roman general Pompey. In 63 BCE, Pompey, after intervening in a civil war between two factions of the Hasmonean family, captured Jerusalem and took control of the city. Though the Hasmoneans retained some level of autonomy, they were now under the influence of Rome. The internal struggles within the Hasmonean family, combined with their reliance on Roman support, left Judea in a vulnerable position. Over the next several decades, the Hasmoneans would be relegated to a puppet role, their authority diminished as Rome's dominance in the region grew. The final blow to the Hasmonean dynasty came in 37 BCE, when the Roman-backed Herod the Great ascended to the throne of Judea. Herod, whose reign was marked by his brutal tactics and massive building projects, including the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, would become the last ruler of Judea before its full annexation into the Roman Empire. Herod's rise to power effectively ended the Hasmonean dynasty, bringing an end to the dream of Jewish political independence that had been realized through the Maccabean Revolt. Despite the fall of the Hasmoneans and the eventual domination of Judea by Rome, the legacy of the Maccabees endured. The story of the Maccabean Revolt was passed down through generations, and their fight for religious freedom became a central theme in Jewish identity. The rededication of the Temple, which symbolized the victory of faith over oppression, became one of the most significant events in Jewish history. The holiday of Hanukkah, which celebrates the miracle of the oil and the military triumph of the Maccabees, continues to be a time of joy, reflection, and thanksgiving for Jews around the world. In addition to its religious significance, the story of the Maccabees also serves as a reminder of the complexities of power, identity, and resistance. The Maccabean Revolt was not simply a battle between Jews and the Seleucids. It was a struggle for the preservation of Jewish identity in a world where competing cultural forces sought to assimilate or erase that identity. The Maccabees' fight for independence and religious observance serves as a powerful symbol of the human desire for autonomy, self-determination, and the preservation of one's culture and beliefs. Furthermore, the Maccabees' story is a reflection of the broader historical reality that resistance movements often face difficult choices and compromises. The Maccabees began their revolt as defenders of Jewish religious purity, but found themselves, over time, making political and military decisions that deviated from their original ideals. The Hasmonean dynasty's embrace of Hellenistic culture and their political maneuvering to maintain power were seen by some as betrayals of the values for which they had originally fought. In this sense, the Maccabees story serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of political power and the challenges of maintaining ideological purity in the face of real-world circumstances. Despite these complexities, the Maccabees story remains a testament to the resilience of the Jewish people. Their victory over the Seleucid Empire, their reclaiming of the Temple, and the establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty are among the most significant accomplishments in Jewish history. Their story is a reminder that even in the darkest times, the light of faith and determination can shine through, and that the fight for religious and cultural freedom is one worth pursuing, regardless of the obstacles faced along the way. In the end, the Maccabees' legacy is not only a story of military conquest or political triumphs, but a narrative of faith, perseverance, and the enduring spirit of a people who, despite the odds, refuse to give up their identity or their religious practices. Their story continues to inspire, to teach, and to remind the world of the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. It is a story that transcends time, place, and circumstance, and it will continue to be remembered as a defining moment in Jewish history and in the broader history of human resistance against oppression and tyranny.
The story of the Maccabees is far more than a historical account of revolt and victory. It is a profound testament to the enduring power of faith, identity, and resilience in the face of adversity. What began as a battle to preserve Jewish religious practices under the oppressive rule of Antiochus IV Epiphanes evolved into a wider struggle for autonomy, political power, and cultural survival. The Maccabees, through their unyielding determination and devotion to their beliefs, achieved an improbable victory that allowed the Jewish people to reclaim their land and their sacred temple, an event forever commemorated in the celebration of Hanukkah. However, the story of the Maccabees is also a cautionary tale about the complexities of power, compromise, and political governance. While the Maccabean Revolt and the subsequent establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty brought Jewish independence and territorial expansion, the political and cultural compromises that followed revealed the challenges of maintaining purity of ideals while navigating the demands of ruling a state. The Hasmonean dynasty, once the hope of the Maccabees' dream of an independent and faithful Jewish kingdom, became entangled in the very Hellenistic practices and political alliances they had initially opposed. Over time, this shift in direction, along with the internal divisions and Roman interference, led to their eventual downfall. Even so, the legacy of the Maccabees is far-reaching. The victory of the Maccabees and their ability to reclaim the temple in Jerusalem left an indelible mark on Jewish religious consciousness. The miracle of the oil, symbolized by the 8 days of Hanukkah, has inspired generations of Jews to persevere in the face of challenges, and the celebration of Hanukkah continues to reinforce the importance of faith, resilience, and the light of hope, even in times of darkness. The Maccabean Revolt also left an enduring cultural and national legacy that shaped Jewish identity, inspiring countless generations to defend their religious practices and cultural traditions in the face of external pressures. Ultimately, the Maccabees' story serves as a reminder of the profound power of resistance, whether to foreign oppression, cultural assimilation, or religious persecution. Their fight was not just a physical one against the Seleucids, but a spiritual and ideological struggle to preserve their identity and beliefs. In a broader sense, the Maccabees' victory has become a symbol of the human capacity to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds, to fight for religious freedom and self-determination, and to ensure that cultural heritage is not lost to the tides of history. The Maccabees' legacy is therefore not confined to the pages of history, but is woven into the fabric of Jewish tradition and continues to inspire faith, perseverance, and identity for Jews and others around the world. Their revolt, the rededication of the temple, and the continuation of the ideals for which they fought remain a beacon of hope, teaching future generations that even the smallest flicker of light can overcome the greatest darkness. In the end, the story of the Maccabees is a timeless one. It is a story of struggle, sacrifice, triumph, and ultimately, the resilience of a people. And though the Maccabean dynasty may have fallen, their spirit lives on, not only in the enduring celebration of Hanukkah, but also in the hearts of those who continue to fight for freedom, faith, and identity in the face of adversity. The Maccabees remind us all that no matter how impossible the struggle may seem, the light of hope, faith, and determination can always shine through.